Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we are used to that. There are always dogs at Free Cities Conference. Yes. Now, I'm happy that so many of you are here, more than ever before, as we just learned from Peter Young. And I want to talk about from vision to reality, because we have now reached a maturity that we can already cautiously make that call. Now, if we want to understand what will happen in the future, it often helps to have a look into the past. Now let's do that. This is the city of Cologne, or Colonia with the Latin name. Around the year 1100, the famous dome is still under construction, which will remain the case for several hundred years. But in the year 1074, there was a first uprising, and it was about the people of the city of Cologne were dissatisfied with their ruler, with at that time was a bishop. They claimed, he doesn't know what's happening in the city, and he does absolutely not care, but we have just to pay taxes, so we're just milking cows. And there was an uprising which was, as it was usual at those days, brutally crashed. But in the year 1103, they could achieve that the city got an own court to deal with the city affairs. Also against a reluctant bishop, but it was established. In the year 1216, they managed to get their first city council, again against the resistance of the then bishop. And it took until the year 1288, when they finally, with the help of some neighboring princes, kicked the bishop out and became a free city. So it took over 200 years. What does this mean? Does it mean we have to always wait 200 years? No, and here's why. Once the spell was broken, things went much faster. You see here, this is a map of the Holy Roman Empire after the 30-year War, 1648. You see the city of Cologne, and the other red dots are other free imperial cities. The big one is, for example, Nuremberg. They had a lot of territories outside the city. After Cologne was the trailblazer, it was happening much quicker. So in the year 1200 to 1400 was the heydays of the free cities. All over Europe you had hundreds of them. And around that time, when this map is valid, there were even some very innovative princes who said, we invite you tradespeople to come to our territory and establish your free city. Why did they do that? Because they were thinking of economic benefits. They just observed that around those cities a lot of economic activity was happening, so they said, you can do this here. And that is why I have the thesis that we do not have to wait again 200 years this time. Some of you might have heard about the book The Sovereign Individual from 1997, a visionary book which predicted cryptocurrency done by private individuals, privately governed entities as developing out of free trade zones, many years before it really happened. You know, in 2007 we had Bitcoin. In 2009, Paul Romer was coming with his visionary Charter City talk, which is not exactly a free city, but is kind of and has helped develop that movement in the right direction. 2015, Liberland was proclaimed. Remember, it was the 30th December of 2017 when the Sede Prospera got their approval from the Honduran government. I know because I was chief legal officer at that time of the project. That was basically the really first free city of a modern type. So it took 20 years. 2018, my book came out, so everybody who doesn't know it, have a look. If you want to start a free city, that will help you. And that was the idea, so that it's not just me, but if I for some reasons pass away or die or whatever, other people can take it up from there. That was the main reason for me for writing the book. In 2019, we had the first seastead in extraterritorial waters. Chet Elwakowski was here, I think last year, speaking about that. So you see it's getting much faster than it was in the past, in the Middle Ages. And again, once the spell is broken this time, things again will go much faster. What you see here is the development of special economic zones. The number of special economic zones around the world, I just looked it up at ChatGPT, it says it's between 7,500 and 8,000 now. And the number of countries has surpassed the 150 out of 200. So I think if we see free cities as a development that is coming out of traditional special economic zones, just reaching new levels of autonomy, but are following in principle the same path. So that means if more prosper Morazan types of special economic zones have been established, then we will very probably see a similar development, maybe not thousands, but we will see increasing number, especially if it's working. You may ask, but aren't we on the retreat? The empire is striking back in Honduras. Yeah, that's true. The Honduran Supreme Court recently declared sedes ex tunc unconstitutional, which is a legal term which means from the beginning, and that means retroactively, right? But my reading is that this ruling of the socialist president is a sign of weakness. They have manned the Supreme Court with their people, as you know, is unfortunately the case in many countries that political parties are sending their soldiers into the big courts, in the Supreme Courts, and they decide as they are wanted to. So the Socialist Party lost the majority in parliament, that the majority to change the constitution a second time, that would have been necessary. So it's still in the constitution that something like sedes can be done. So they instead, they resorted to lawfare and went to the Supreme Court. That's my reading. And as a jurist, I can tell you what the International Court for the settlement of investor disputes in Washington, where you may know there is a lawsuit on trial between Prospera and other companies in Honduras. They will normally refer to a principle which is called fair and equitable treatment, which in a nutshell says, as an investor, you can expect it to not be treated arbitrarily, and you should be able to rely on the official acts of a certain country. Now let's look just for a minute what kind of official acts have been happening in Honduras. Well, first, the constitutional amendments were approved back in 2013, and based on that, the organic sede law. Now that was 11 years ago, and since then that was in existence. So the legislative, the parliament, has clearly said sedes can exist. We're creating a legal basis for that. An investor should be able to rely on what the laws the parliament's made. Then even the Supreme Court has been challenged twice, at least twice, I know of twice. I think Prospera recently has published that it was even 4 or 5 times. People have said sede law is unconstitutional, and they have upheld it twice. So even the courts have supported that view. And finally, the government has approved 3 sedes and has conducted an international treaty with the country of Kuwait saying the sedes should have a guarantee of 50 years. Now, declaring this all invalid retroactively will not hold legally. That's absolutely clear for everybody who has a certain legal knowledge, when it may be in front of a Honduran court, but not in front of an international court, where neutral arbitrators are. Because this goes against all principles that have been established, and insofar even in Honduras, a large minority of Supreme Court judges have said, well, maybe it's invalid from now on, but not retroactively. The result of this will be that Honduras will lose its lawsuit in Washington, which is $10.6 billion alone from Prospera and a bit more from other companies. So somebody said it's about $12 billion, which is an amount that Honduras cannot pay. That means my reading is the next government will very likely come back to the negotiation table and say, hey, let's try to solve that situation. So I would say there's still hope for the cities in Honduras, but this is just a speculation based out of my legal knowledge and experience over several years, but it can be different, right? But even if the cities do not come back, which may happen or may not happen, their ideas and concept are there now. The genie is out of the bottle and it will not go back in the bottle again. Prospera's innovations are now a precedent for other projects. And they have done a lot of innovations which are currently destroyed by a group of people that calls themselves progressives. But the real progress has been made in cities. They have a citizen contract for the first time. It's called Agreement of Coexistence. They have an e-residency program. They have an effective land registration and transfer system, which wasn't existing in Honduras before. They have a simple and user-friendly tax system. Private arbitration is a default for every resident. Competitive provision of basic public services. Common law regulatory options, 3D property rights, medical reciprocity laws. The latter means if you are approved as a doctor in any OECD country, you're automatically approved in the city, which is great. It's a big problem in many countries. And Ciudad Juárez, you never hear about Ciudad Morazán in the press. Why not? Because it's a working class city, right? So their narrative does not fit to that, and so far everybody is only talking about Prospera, but undeserved. Ciudad Morazán is trailblazing. It has made history as the first free city for the working class. And it's very popular. I've been there twice. So there is momentum. Why? Because many more projects are in the pipeline. It's not just those two cities. There are a lot of groups, not only my company Tipolis, that is negotiating with governments about the establishment of autonomous regions, autonomous cities, free cities. There are other groups, and many of them are presenting here today. Prospera is trying to establish something in Africa. We know that Charter City Institute is very active in Africa as well. Then we have eco-villages in Latin America, Alpha Team in Portuguese-speaking countries, and this strange sign up there, that is NEOM. NEOM is interesting for us because it's a country, it's a state, the state of Saudi Arabia, which wants to promote this project. And NEOM is, by definition, a one country, two systems model, where there should be a more liberal legal framework than in the rest of Saudi Arabia, should attract innovation and residents from all over the world. It will probably not be a privately governed entity, but a state-governed public entity. But I think the big message that is going out from this project, which is backed by billions and billions of oil money from Saudi Arabia, if even states are now advocating that model, then there is momentum. It's just there. And if it was only the Free Cities Foundation and only Tipolis that would work on that, you could legitimately ask, well, is this really a market? Is this really a movement? But if you have 10 companies, and including governments, that are working on that model, you have several thousand special economic zones. The most modern and innovative of those have own courts and own legal system, own jurisdiction, then you can say this is not stoppable any longer. It's just there, it's happening. And why is it happening? Because free cities are superior, mainly for three reasons. First, people do not want to pay for things they have not ordered. Ask yourself. People do not want to be subjugated by rules and regulations that they have not consented to. True or not? Ask yourself. Finally, people need a safe space to congregate and cooperate peacefully, but are otherwise left alone by coercive authorities. And free cities can deliver that. Most other systems cannot. And that is why the vision is eventually becoming reality. Maybe not as quickly as we wish. Maybe there will be setbacks like in Honduras now, but eventually free cities will happen. It's unavoidable. And even the PR battle will eventually be won. Why? Because it's a completely voluntary model. Locals, like in Honduras, they have no local had a disadvantage of Prospera and Morazan being there. It's just a positive. They had a new option to go there, or they stay where they are. They have zero disadvantage. And finally, jobs are created, which is very important for governments and for politicians, which will eventually lead to the support of free cities because of the economic benefits that they bring to the whole country, like in the Middle Ages with the free cities. And finally, you can always tell politicians that are hostile against free cities or journalists or political activists the question, what exactly is your problem with letting people voluntarily try out new systems of living together? What exactly? Tell me. And ask this question. If you think about Bitcoin, take the financial newspaper of your choice and look back 10 years, 15 years, 5 years. Only negative coverage, only. It's a Ponzi scheme, it's for criminals, it's money laundering, it's not real, it's a tulip bubble, it's still there. And now, the biggest financial institutions in the world, BlackRock and others, have their Bitcoin ETFs. It's normal now, despite all the bad press. And there wasn't no good press coverage of Prospera either, 90% or 95% negative coverage. But the Hondurans were coming in droves, and everybody else too. And that will be the same. Eventually, people will get used, okay, there are free cities. Some people like it, others don't, but it's an option. Because maintaining wealth without freedom will not work. You cannot overtax, overregulate, and censor people and expect that they will uphold a standard of living, make all kinds of innovation, and happily pay 60% of their income to the state. This is not going to work, especially not in a time where most people are very mobile. They can just go into another country and continue working on their laptops. That is what the authors of The Sovereign Individual predicted in 1997, that our current systems will be replaced by what they call a democracy of choice. People want to choose for themselves which system they're living in, which part of taxes they pay, and for what these taxes are spent. And that is also the reason why I'm so optimistic, because I know that people eventually go where they are treated best. You can use state power to prevent such models where they are treated very well, but not forever. So eventually, you don't have to be a Bitcoiner, you don't have to be a libertarian to come to the conclusion that I prefer living where I'm treated better. That's normal, that's natural. And because this is so, it's a human incentive, I'm looking forward to what we hear in the next 2 days. You are all part of a new epoch that is coming, and it's unstoppable. Thank you.
some questions from the audience.
I've just heard that I'm allowed to take some questions. So if you have questions, please. Otherwise, on Sunday, there's another session where you can ask me all kinds of questions. Mark.
As I've heard, the Supreme Court ruling in Honduras may come out at 5 p.m. this evening, and their time. You know, there's, 3 hangovers before they have to answer any questions on Monday, so they always release it very late. Supposedly it will be out this week. Do you expect anything different than what has been reported in the newspapers? Because at this point, the Supreme Court hasn't written down anything. It's just simply...
Because it's difficult, right?
Right. Oh, and they're also stringing their country up for billions of dollars. But yeah.
No, because for the reasons I've given you, it's really hard for the Supreme Court to make a justification for retroactive ruling when the law was in existence for 11 years, right? This is a very, very long period. So they will come up with something, right? When I was a young jurist in the training at the Court for Public Affairs in Karlsruhe, the leading judge told then us, we were in the back room, then with the other judges, I was allowed to participate there, being a trainee, and he said, you know what, we're looking what is the desired outcome, and then we find a justification. And I was outraged, right, at that time as a young jurist, but that's the reality, let's face it, right? They will find some reasons, but it will not hold when it comes to the International Arbitration Court. That's it? Okay, 1 minute to go. Okay, that's, again, Sunday there's a session where you can ask me questions for 45 minutes, I think. So if you have other questions, thank you very much again.